In this week's video, we talk about installing butcherblock counters. If you're doing laminate counters, you can follow along a lot of the same steps. Just ignore everything about staining or sealing them. And if you're doing butcherblock, know that you can leave them in their natural color, or you can stain them to whatever color you want. For us, our butcher blocks required that they needed to be stained or sealed within 48 hours of opening them. We weren't ready for that, and so it kind of gave us a rush to do everything. Either way, we're done now. We've been using them for a week or so, and they are great so far. So let me show you how to do it.
As soon as we opened the packaging, we test fit our counters. One side fit perfectly and the other side we had to go and cut to length. Whenever you're doing a kitchen, make sure to know which piece of countertop is going on what side even before you order it. At this point, I also switched out the brackets to the stronger ones from the Ikea kitchen and measured my level lines and installed angle brackets where our dishwasher would go. Our countertops were really sturdy, but this was just extra assurance that nothing would slip down or fall. I also added some pocket holes to the underside of the countertop where both sides would butt up together. There are special countertop connectors you can buy, but I find that the pocket holes work perfectly for our situation. And finally, I added a few coats of clear sealer on the underneath and back sides of the countertops before we installed them. You'll notice that I have a piece of tape marked, and that's where I wanted our front and top of the cabinet. We left it untreated because we would be later staining it, but if you're just going with a clear coat, you can do it all ahead of time. Once both pieces were set, we took out the top drawers, opened the doors, and used the screws provided from Ikea to screw down our countertop. We also attached the counter to our angle brackets and leveled both sides and attached them with the pocket holes. For the sink, I used tape to mark out the edges of the cabinets and the front of where the sink would go. Then I cut out the sink template and pre-drilled a hole for my jigsaw. We were doing an overmount sink, so we weren't too worried about having a perfectly cut hole. Every now and then I would stop to gather all the dust and put it in a container for later. I was having trouble sawing the angled corners, so we found it easiest to use a 1-inch drill bit and then cut up to them. I used all the extra sawdust to fill in the gap in between the two countertops. Using wood filler, I squished it in the sides, but I was having a lot of trouble getting out of my tube. Then I scraped away the excess and then put the sawdust on top. It probably would have been easier to mix the sawdust up with the wood filler, but it mostly worked out in the end. Once it was dry, I went in and sanded everything down, cleaned it up, and then we had nicely prepped countertops. If you're not planning on staining your wood countertops, you can clear coat them at this stage as well. You can oil them or use a polyacrylic like I did. Just make sure to research ahead of time and do some test spots before. Speaking of testing, I had a few stains already, and I applied them on the piece left over from our sink cutout. I would also suggest to use a pre-stain conditioner to get a more even coat. However, I didn't have any, and I needed to get this done within 48 hours of opening the wood packaging. Whenever you're planning a staining project, make sure to have a lot of rags on hand because you're going to be wiping up your surface a lot. I would do a small section at first, then wipe up, and then do another section and try and feather it in. Staining is a pretty quick process, and it really makes a big transformation on the look of your wood. I chose a color to complement the house, but you can choose whatever you want. You'll notice from this angle that we have some strange cutouts for our sink. I wanted the sink to go as far back as possible, but unfortunately the metal bar from the Ikea section system was in the way. To get over that, we had to cut in some notches, and that way our sink fits in nicely. I went back in afterwards with a small detail brush to try and match the stain better where I added the wood filler. It didn't quite work out, so just keep that in mind if you have to add a lot of wood filler. It will not match perfectly. Once everything had dried, I added another few coats of polyacrylic and sanded it in between each step as is marked on the can. Then we installed our sink and faucet, and now everything looks great.
Loud.
Not sure if you could see a sneak peek of some of the other things we've been working on, but make sure to follow along the video series and all that will be coming up soon.